Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ann Cuppinger, and I want to welcome you to Guiding Change Strategies for Family Peer Support Program Leaders webinar. I'm really happy that you took a lovely summer afternoon to join us for this webinar, and I think you're in for a real treat. We have Tony Salerno, who I'll introduce in a minute, who's going to be guiding you through a really interesting conversation about what change management is all about. This webinar is being hosted by CTAC and MCTAC. For those of you who aren't aware, CTAC is the Community Technical Assistance Center, and MCTAC is the Managed Care Technical Assistance Center. And this slide just shows you some of the many partners that are really deeply involved with the CTAC and MCTAC work that we're doing. And I think what's really nice about this is that there's really a strong recognition of, a variety of expertise that can help us really make this transition effectively. So the focus of some people have asked, what's the difference between MCTAC and CTAC? And really, we work very, very closely together. And in many cases, events like this are, really put on with the expertise of both groups. MCTAC is funded specifically to help organizations make this transition to Medicaid managed care. And CTAC, also involved in that, is a little bit more focused on the actual services and programs, clinical and support services that are offered to children and families. But there are two websites, and in the end, we'll give you information on both of those websites, and we encourage you to visit them and sign up for the listserv so that you get information from both MCTAC and CTAC. So we'd like to talk to people a little bit about what you can do to take best advantage of the technical assistance that's offered by CTAC and MCTAC. There are a lot of different offerings, and we know if you are on our listserv that you're getting lots of emails and trying to figure out which things apply to you and which ones don't. We're working to make sure we label the offerings in case there's a specific provider audience that is best suited for that offering. But you should also feel very free, and I would encourage you as family support programs to think broadly about what might be relevant to you. We also encourage you to really pull together a team, and Tony's going to talk a little bit more about that today, so that as you go through this process of trying to field all of this change that's going on, you're not, as executive directors, trying to do this on your own. For some of you, that means, a team within your small not-for-profit organization that you might need to augment with other people. For others, it may mean really trying to insert yourself into whatever process is happening for your larger agency. So we're glad you're here, and we hope you'll really continue to stay involved in the MCTAC and CTAC offerings. So we thought we ought to answer this question, why a webinar on change management? And I think there's no question really that there's an awful lot of change going on right now. And I think that there's an inclination when there's a lot of change going on to really gravitate toward looking for very specific answers. How do I submit a bill? Can you send me a form that will show me how to, register for a particular, network? How do I negotiate a contract with a managed care organization? And all of that technical assistance will be forthcoming over the next year for children's providers and for family support providers included in that group. And some of those offerings that have occurred so far that are really focused on adult providers are also very relevant for you as you think about the mechanics of participating in Medicaid managed care. But you're in a really unique position, I think, to be able to help guide your program or your service within your larger agency through this change process. And how you do that really makes a big difference. And in fact, there's even some research that suggests that the culture and climate that you create in your organization is as important, if not even more important, than some of the things you do. That the power of the work that your advocates do has very much to do with how you lead them through this change and the kind of culture you create in your organization. So we wanted to offer you a chance to kind of step back from the details and think about your role as leaders. We've got a diverse group of providers on the phone today, And, you know, some of what we say will make more sense to one audience or another. And our hope is really that something piques your interest during this conversation today, and that you leave here with some ideas about how you can effectively lead your agency and your staff and even your community through this change process. So without further ado, I want to introduce Tony Salerno. Tony works at the McSilver Institute, and McSilver is a partner, a CTAC partner, and he just has a wealth of experience. He's a licensed psychologist with over 30 years of experience. Sorry, Tony, I had to say that number. And he's worked in a wide range of settings. He's been a clinician, a supervisor, an administrator of mental health programs. He has a lot of experience working closely with family and consumer organizations, doing a lot of different training, and really focusing on the principles and practices of psych rehab and wellness self-management, which, although those are programs that really live in the adult world, have so much relevance to family peer support that I'm really happy that he's able to join us today, because I think he really understands the world that you live in. He's also doing a lot of organizational and leadership training statewide and nationally, and he has real deep experience in change management and lined up with his understanding of peer services and mental health services for kids and families. So without further ado, I would like to turn the presentation over to Tony and let him take it from here. Before I do that, though, I want to just alert you to how this webinar will operate in terms of your participation. We've muted everybody because we have as many as 50 people on the phone, on the call, and that could just create an awful lot of background noise. But we are going to use the chat function. So if you look at the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see like a little speech bubble, and it says chat underneath that. If you click on that, it'll open up a box down below, and there's an opportunity for you to chat your questions or comments to the group. In that drop-down menu where it says Send To, what you're going to want to do is send to all attendees, or if you have a question that's just for the panelists, you can send it to us. But I think it's great to send it to all attendees, and other people can see the questions that are being asked. So you would just click on all attendees and then write your question, and then we'll read those out so that everyone can hear them as we go along. So, Tony, take it away.
Thanks so much, Ann. I very much appreciate the opportunity to share, some of my lessons learned and experiences. As Ann mentioned, I'm actually a retiree of the New York State Office of Mental Health. So about 5 years ago, so I put in 30 years. And during that time, I was very much involved in running outpatient programs, partial hospitalization programs. I was also inpatient at Rockland Psychiatric Center for about a dozen years. Then, actually, before I became a psychologist, I was a high school teacher on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And so for the last 5 years, this whole area of change management, and I just wish I knew a lot more about this when I was actually in a position of running programs, being a supervisor, director of rehab centers, things like that. Because I think it would have helped me a great deal in terms of what do I do, what are some of the things I can do as a leader to help guide the really the workforce, those who are going to be the recipients of these changes. How can I support the guidance around change? And that's when leadership, becomes like really prominent. Whenever you're in a position where part of your job or much of your job is to assist others to successfully meet new challenges and demands, and that's where leadership is critically important. And there have been folks who've actually taken a close look at this over the years, and that's really what I'm here to share with you, some of these pointers, some ideas. And as Ann mentioned, if you come away with just one idea that's very practical for you, that you can actually implement in a new way, that's terrific. You can get that out of a webinar. I think that that's really fabulous. That's what I look for whenever I'm on a webinar. Is there at least one idea here that I can use in a practical sense to really move a process along? So that's what I'm going to share with you, today. Okay, so change management for managed care and the focus of this webinar, really CTAC and MCTAC, there are three major things that we do. One is we can provide some information and guidance around steps that leaders take to support and guide the change process. And that's going to be the focus for today. The other part, of course, is how to actually make improvements. Now that means implementation of new processes, activities, structures that would really make a difference. So that's the whole area of continuous quality improvement. Then the other piece that we focus on is a workforce development. What is it that the workforce needs to know and be able to do in order to effectively function within a changing environment and changing system. So those are the three major areas for MIGTAC and CTAC. And for today, we're really going to be focusing on, so what do we know about change management? And how can we use some of this information in a way that is going to be useful for you and those that you work with? So let me just say this first thing about it. Leadership, and particularly today, and I don't have to convince you of that, we're really in this period of rapid change, shifting change. I'm an old guy, so I've been around in the field for over 35 years, and I've certainly seen things come and go. But I must say that during this time, it's been probably the most rapid and shifting change that I've seen across the whole system. And so everyone, when they're in such a change process, it's really difficult to kind of plan and to make decisions like, what do I do? And this picture of the rapids really illustrates for me the challenge that leaders have is, how do you maneuver around these shifting changes? And it's very different than this, right? Now, this would be really nice if we knew exactly what direction we're going in, if everyone knew exactly what they were supposed to be doing, and we all did it at the same pace and at the same time and in the same direction. That's not the world that we're living in today. And so if it feels kind of rocky, if it feels ambiguous, there's nothing new about that. That is not a problem. That is basically a recognition of when you have systems-level changes across many, many levels of a system and service providers, and everyone is being affected, it is the challenge for leadership. So what is a leader, to do? Guiding the organization through change on lessons. And, people have asked me this question a lot. All right, Tony, so you know something about organizational change. So, how do you plan for and prepare for what at times seems to be a very ambiguous system where no one can just spell out for you exactly, what's going to happen? And I guess my response to that is you can't go wrong if you focus on quality, quality, and quality of whatever you're doing. The system in the future is not going to reinforce poor quality. And if you're engaged in just quality, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at a point in this presentation of what do we mean by quality. And that's really my sort of suggestion and advice to organizations is that you can't go wrong, you won't make mistakes, you're not wasting your time if you simply focus your efforts on improving the quality of what you currently do. And that'll put you in a good position and a strong position to deal with any of the changes that are ahead. So the three critical areas, as I had mentioned to you, around change management, quality improvement, and workforce development are the areas that we focus on. So, visit the website, be attentive to any of the offerings from CTAC or MIGTAC, and those are the three areas that really, when you think about trying to manage all the changes ahead, it will involve all of those three major areas. So I want to share with you this pyramid. I came across the work of John Kotter a number of years ago, and he wrote a book called The Heart of Change. And what I like so much about what Dr. Kotter had to say was he wasn't a very theoretical guy. He didn't want to be up in the clouds. He was answering this very important question: what is it that leaders do in organizations that succeed? And what is it that leaders don't do in organizations that fail? And he spent many years going into organizations and just identifying those who were successful in dealing with change and those who flopped. And he wanted to understand, well, are there certain things the leaders are doing in those organizations that adjust and adapt to change successfully, and then those organizations that don't? And what he began to put together was a whole set of steps that leaders who were successful in supporting their organization through change what they did versus what leaders failed to do in organizations that just continually struggled with trying to adapt to change successfully. And so he identified these 8 areas, and that's what I want to share with you. And some of these, depending on your particular position and where you're sitting in terms of your roles right now, some of these will make perfect sense, others may not. I think the important thing is that if you can extract one idea from the work that Carter did, and you can use that in your work today, that would be fantastic. So let me share each one of those steps with you in a little more detail. So, building a sense of urgency. Well, you'd say maybe, well, really, do we have to spend much time on that? It seems pretty urgent. But when I mean urgency, it isn't, and the way Carter's presented it, it isn't like people being scared or people being worried. But it's leadership that is communicating a sense that, you know, what's happening in the system that we need to adjust to, it's big, it's important, it's something that we need to be part of, we need to be prepared, that not adjusting to change is not going to be very supportive of the work that we do. And so it's the idea of it's something that the organization begins to own and saying we recognize that things don't sit still, that systems, organizations, especially complex systems that we live in, will change, and how we look at that is very important. In the bottom there's a few things that leaders may be tempted, and I'll be honest with you, I've been tempted to say exactly these things. Again, I've been around a long time, and I've been in that position where I had to present information to the staff that I was supervising, to those who were being affected by some of these changes, and I had to communicate that there was a change ahead, and usually the human response to change isn't like, oh, fantastic, isn't that great that we have to do things differently. That's usually not the response. And it's just a basic human nature to respond that way. And leaders are human too. And that's what happens. And I must tell you, there are times when I reflect on some of my own ways of communicating. I really wish I had done it differently, because I didn't communicate a sense of, like, urgency, which is this is important. This means it's not going to be easy. This is something that we can do, but it's something that we must do. And that's a different tone than the communication, oh, how horrible these things are. So leaders may be tempted to reflect on the most negative, minimizing or discounting responses in change. So those SOBs don't know what they're doing. This is crazy. You know, get used to it. I don't know what to do. This is going to be a disaster. Don't worry. Or the opposite, which is, don't worry. This is no big deal. So minimizing or catastrophizing, when leaders do it, even if one feels that in one's heart, when leaders do it, it has really a very strong negative impact on those that you're communicating to. And I must tell you, there are times that I wish I could take that back on some of my communications. But again, this is why I think understanding change management is important, to kind of recognize what some of our very common responses would be as leaders, and then how we need to communicate so that we can really support and guide others through change. So building a sense of urgency is an important thing. And in communicating urgency, I mentioned a few of these. What's the message here, right? Let's say you're the messenger. So what's the message? This change is vitally important. That doesn't mean you agree with it. That means it's vitally important. This will not go away if we ignore it. It is not going to be easy. The change will be uncomfortable and requires to work differently. Everyone is part of successfully managing change. Nobody is just a piece of furniture who doesn't matter. The clients we serve need us to manage this change well. I think that's a really important piece, to not forget what could happen in a lot of change, and this is found in the organizational literature. The more anxious organization providers are, then there's a process of looking inward, right, self-concerns, rather than concerns for those that are being served. So managing a change well is something that our clients need us to do. The change may offer us some positive opportunities if we do it well, and a difficult road if we don't. And that's another very important, that's an urgency message as well, that we need to do this well. We need to be knowledgeable, we need to be aware of what's going on, we need to direct our energy towards meeting these challenges, and that's an important concept. We need everyone to be on board. and will positively acknowledge those who support our efforts to change. Because the human response, there will be some folks who just really find this change process something that they would find very difficult. And their notion is, or can be very much, holding back an organization or a service or a provider in moving ahead, whatever your role happens to be, in the system. And the organization owns the change. That's different than agreeing, but views the change as something we must do and that we'll do well. So just something to keep in mind when you're in that position to communicating to whoever it is, whoever the stakeholder, the shareholder, the person that you're interacting with, around the importance of managing this change successfully. Getting the vision right. That's another thing that Dr. Carter discovered, that leaders who were able to say and articulate, this is what we want to accomplish, with some clarity and some consistency, focus on a vision that bridges current and future practices. What it really comes down to is, okay, what's this future going to look like for us in the context of this changing, system? What is it that we need to keep doing? And I don't get any more sophisticated than this. And this is a piece I've kind of added to Carter's work, is in a very simple way to ask a question. What is it that we need to keep doing that aligns with the change process? What is it that we're going to have to stop doing, that this is going to not align with changes ahead and is going to cause us some difficulties, or things that we just haven't done that we'll need to start doing differently? And that simple kind of three-part approach to change, I think, can be useful at times when you're thinking about, so where are we going? What do we want to see us accomplishing within the context, right, that we don't have 100 degrees of freedom here, that we have a certain set of realities or parameters that we need to manage within. But within that, what is our mission that we're able to accomplish in our vision? So again, Carter found that to be really important so that others could be support and had a sense of the direction that the organization was going in. Communicating for buy-in is really providing information about what it means to work in a managed care environment. And you get there by being as knowledgeable and as informed as possible. And clarity is critical, right? And that's one thing I must say, that this is one of the challenges for leadership, because things oftentimes are not so clear. But even being able to articulate what is it that we're clear about, what is it that's still in the process of being a decision that's going to need to be made by others. And so there are parts of this change process where we have some confidence that it's moving in this direction, but others we have to just be prepared, right, that there may be some shifts. As again, that whitewater rafting picture that I find very useful in my head when I think about the system ahead. The benefits of working in a managed care. So is there anything that we can gain from this? Is there any positive aspect to now coming under the umbrella of a managed care system? The downside of not planning for change, involving the staff in sharing their ideas so that the staff also are engaged in problem solving, engaged in how we're going to manage this well, is very important, because sometimes it may seem like the staff are just in a passive position who are just going to get directions or instructions rather than contributing their ideas and their problem-solving strategies. And most importantly, and I'll speak more about this, is to help staff regain a sense of control, status, and personal meaning. I'll talk more about that later on, because there's some very good findings, and very interesting findings about the impact of major change on the workforce. Like, how does the workforce react to whenever there's a major change that's being announced? And I'll share a little bit about that with you. And also emphasize that there are some supports, resources, tools available to support us, that we're not out there alone, that others are struggling with the same thing, that there are resources such as MCTAC and CTAC that we can make sure that we're connected to so that we're able to be as informed as possible. So let's just chat for a second, and this is a place for you to kind of type into the chat box. When you step back a little bit, in whatever role, your role in leadership role, and ask yourself this: if I'm going to communicate, let's say I'm planning to communicate to the folks that, depending again on your particular role that I work with, and some of you in a larger system, Some of you are kind of in a small, program that tends to be more independent. But in any way, if you could just kind of wrap your head around this question here, what would be the most critical idea for you to communicate to the stakeholders? So, I mean, that really means anyone that you are communicating to, right? That will promote buy-in. What do you think is the most important message that needs to be shared so that the folks you're sharing this information with are likely to be on your side and really support the efforts around change? So let me just give you guys a moment to think about that and to type that into the chat box. And as you do, I think Jerry will be taking a look at some of those responses. And if Jerry or Brianna, whoever, could just share what things people are typing in, okay? Now we have 35 people on. I hope to get 35 responses. Okay, Jerry or Brianna, are you guys seeing the chat box?
Hi, Tony. This is Ann. I'm going to step in. I know Jerry's trying to share some of these, but she may be having trouble connecting. So what I'm saying, one of the participants mentioned that it's really important for her to let people know that she's going to be there with them as they go through this change, that it's something that they're not alone in handling, and that they're all going to learn together as these changes come through.
Fantastic.
Another participant shared that their clients need us to continue receiving high-quality care, which we can provide.
Okay, great, great. Just want to encourage folks to not be bashful and just kind of chat in.
We also have another comment. An important message to share is that we'll be okay if we work as a team.
Right. Right. Oh, I love this. No, those are three great messages. I would steal every one of those, actually.
Well, we'll save all these and we can share them back with the group. Another person shared that family support services will remain high value-based service for families. The families will continue to respond positively to peer support services. So kind of no matter what the change is, that's going to be a really important service.
Right. Right.
And that we, the family and I, are going to work on this new challenge together.
Right.
You know, these folks, Tony, are not only responding to these changes as an organization, but because they're viewed as such a resource to families, the questions are coming to them. What's happening? They're starting to feel the changes now. We heard that on an earlier webinar. Until now, families were kind of not necessarily impacted by the change, but that's starting to happen. Yeah.
Great. No, all of those. Is there anything else coming in?
No, go ahead. Comment.
Okay. No, I was just going to say is what's so important about that message is that one is that we're really not alone, that we can work together, that we can bring together, families, our own team, and others to support our efforts. And I think that's a very important message. The message around that, our clients, the families that we serve, the clients that are our main focus, they need us to do this well. That's really an incredibly important message, and that we're not alone and that we can do it together. And I just want to say that that's really very powerful. And thinking it through, and maybe there are some other elements, so that if you actually had to address an audience, right, and you were trying to make the case and to communicate for buy-in, what are some of the critical messages you would include? The ones people have chatted in are fantastic. That's an engaging message. Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
Yeah, there's a couple more coming through too, Tony.
Great, great.
Someone else added that they want to really share the unique services that Family Secure Support offers and what they do differently than other providers in the system, and that it's a process that together we can do it.
Right. Right. I like that because it's the idea of the added value. It's part of what Kata talks about is having a vision of what we're about, how we contribute, to quality overall, and that, you know, collectively we bring together those a unique contribution, and not to lose sight of that. And so within this larger system of change, we have a very important and valuable role to play. And for that to be a very direct message out there and helps to guide those who are involved in managing the change. It's perfect. And I think there's another one as well, Ann?
There is. Someone else mentioned that the urgency is important to communicate, because if we don't make these changes, we may not be here to help our clients if we're not open to learning new ways of providing this service.
Right. Let me tell you,
So
the 6 or 7 folks who typed in, you guys could do this presentation around communicating for buying. It's fabulous. It's perfect. And those are exactly the kinds of messages. So thanks so much for those who contributed. And I'm sure there are others who were thinking about that who may not have typed in. But as a leader, think of your message to whoever it is that you're interacting with is so critically important. And I think you guys have gotten that down very well. Thank you. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. So I want to share a little bit about, again, this whole idea of, this change process. There are folks like a guy named Woodward who he wanted to understand something such as, why is it that people often say that they're having difficulties getting buy-in, particularly from the workforce, or there's some resistance. You hear that constantly, that the workforce is kind of resistant to sort of change. And so he was interested in understanding, what is that really all about? And, what is part of human nature? And actually, this is some of the things he found, and I wanted to share that with you. For some of you, you may actually have a staff and a team that you're communicating with, people you might supervise, or you're part of a larger organization where you do need the support of others. And this is what Woodward found, and I found this very useful, and maybe you'll find it useful as well. That staff are often concerned that a significant change, such as becoming being part of a managed care system, will negatively affect. There are basically 3 things. This is what Woodward found. What is it that folks are really concerned about in change? That you might identify some behavior that you would you might view as resistant to change. 1, the meaning that they derive in their work. That's what folks are very concerned about. Is this, if we get involved with all this managed care, am I going to have a change in my role and my function, the things that I do that currently are very satisfying and professionally rewarding to me? That is something that Woodward found over and over and over again. One of the top concerns of any of those working within systems that are changing. So that's an important issue. The other is control. People are very concerned that when there's a change, they're asking themselves, is there going to be some unwanted demands on my time, energy, and some of my autonomy? Am I going to have less control in my work? And people don't like to have less control. They like to have more control. It's just part of human nature as well. And so that's another area. And the other part is there going to be any change in their status? They're going to have any effect on their authority or position in the organization? Now, depending on the change and the organization, the person's role, one or more of these may be in play. And it's just important for leadership to be aware of that. If you're seeing those who may not be, let's say, on board and supporting the change process, what they're most often concerned about is one or more of these 3 areas. And that can open up a conversation rather than you're either with me or you're against me, or you're a bad staff member or a good staff person, or you're a supporter or a non-supporter. It's just having some sensitivity to the fact that human beings respond to change in a number of ways, and these are very, very understandable concerns, and they need to be addressed, at least starting with a conversation. And so I wanted to share that with you as well. This is one of those areas that I wish I knew a little bit more of years ago when I was in a position of running programs and had a very large staff, under my auspice. And this is another thing that Woodward found, is that when there's change, what people really want is they just want some kind of understanding. Basically, it just kind of recognize that change is a little bit tough for people. They want information, that's really critically important. Just, what's going on? what is it that I need to do? People sometimes are very, very supportive of any change in an organization. They're committed to ensuring that the organization thrives, and they'll do whatever they need to do to make that happen, but they do need some information so that they have a sense of what is it that you need to do, for me to do differently to support you. They need some ideas, problem-solving ideas, any strategies to help them to successfully meet the change process. But sometimes what people can get is avoidance, autocratic behavior, meaning the authority comes down very strong on them, or this kind of really inappropriate sort of cheerleading. The cheerleading is just out of sync, with what people are actually experiencing. So it's just important, and I think the top part is the most important thing. People need a little understanding, they need some information, and they need some ideas in terms of steps that they can take to meet the change successfully, and at the same time, right, to work and to provide services that is personally and professionally meaningful. So some organizations handle this pretty well. That's what Woodward found. He says others did not. And the qualities of those organizations who did a very nice job of engaging and involving the workforce, they had a certain openness, right? They were not very defensive. They were not autocratic. They wanted to hear. They offered opportunities for folks to kind of share what are some of your concerns, what is it that you're not clear about, what information do you need, all of those, that kind of like openness to the concerns of the workforce, and just openness also to new learning and change. Some organizations aren't like that. Some organizations feel very insular. They kind of wrap a, sort of a bubble around them and very protective. And those organizations simply did not do very well. Those organizations that provide support, that communicate frequently, and also are willing to, try new things out. There's like an openness to like new learning. Because, we all can establish a certain kind of equilibrium in our lives and get used to it. Anyway, it's great. Now we found the kind of way to do business that feels comfortable. And in a learning organization or an openness to trying new things, those organizations that have that as part of their culture really respond very well to change, and those that don't really have a difficult time. So assist the staff with the change process, view the change as a process. It takes some time, involve people in the planning, decision-making, and really attending to things that we're going to have to stop doing, some of the endings, things we may even like that we were doing, we may need to stop doing. And then there are things that we need to begin doing a little bit differently. And there are things that we ought to just keep doing because it aligns perfectly with the changing systems ahead. So as I mentioned, that some of these concerns is that once you've finally found some balance and equilibrium to manage your day-to-day function, nobody wants to go into a work situation where I have no clue what's going to happen here today. There's already enough of that built into most organizations. But the notion that, we have to keep discovering a new formula every day is just impossible, really, for organizations. And sometimes practitioners have finally found a way to deal with all the paperwork that we currently do. In some cases, some programs have had to do very little paperwork. Now the change is going to be doing more paperwork, and that's going to be a concern for folks. And now you want me to do what? I'm kind of like, we're not just sitting around just kind of waiting for things to be done or someone to give us an idea of what to do. That's usually not the case. So again, reflecting on this may have very strong relevance for your organization and your program that you're involved in, or less so. But understanding that change on the workforce and here is what's really pretty important. And I take this as a takeaway message that I think is very helpful. I try to share this also and have with leadership at very high levels, in the systems. And that is, it's not unusual for the leadership to believe that it's engaged in promoting strategic change. They plan full, we've kind of worked it out, we have time frames, we know what's going to take place. But really for the workforce, they can experience as a shock change. And I think that that's what I've been observing throughout the state is while at higher levels, it may seem like, gee, we're kind of developing very strategic, it's very planful, we're looking towards like the future, even though it's very complicated, but it feels still like it's a strategic process. But the workforce, maybe family members, the clients may not experience it as strategic. They may experience it as sort of an unwanted, an unwelcome type of like change, which Woodward talks about it as almost like a shock change process. Okay, so that was, and now the next step, I just wanted to remind you guys that we're going through this. So we've gone through the 3 areas. Now I want to talk about, you know, the idea of a team. But in order to think about team, we have to first look at concepts based on the organization size and structure. So these next few steps, you know, we have families, peer support leaders. You're managing nonprofit organizations, as well as leaders of managing programs that is embedded within a larger provider organization. So putting together a team means something different, you know, depending on the context that you're in. That's recognized, right? So you may need to create a team or need to determine how to join or coordinate your efforts with being within a team. Let me just say something about leadership and teams. Whenever you're playing an important role in guiding an organization or others through a change process, that's a leadership role, even if you're not identified and designated as the formal leader in a particular meeting, let's say. So, well, there's the chair or that's the leader right there. But it isn't as if there's just single leader and then there's, you know, team members who are followers. In a major change process, you may be in a context, in a large organization in particular, where there is a CEO or an executive that's kind of leading, but there are individuals in that team meeting who are also needing to now go back and exercise leadership within their own purview. And that's an important piece as well. So these next slides have to do with teams. It's assuming that you're in a role where there are others who are part of your team that you need to engage and involve. So building the right team, and so who should be on this team, right? If you're transitioning to managed care. And again, these are just some pointers. Some of these may make sense, some of them may not so much. But in an ideal situation, particularly of a system of a considerable size, where there's leadership who can make decisions who are part of that whole improvement and change process. Sometimes you have teams where there's no one with really much muscle on the team. They're going to have to engage other leaders in order to get any you know, improvement efforts actually implemented. So leadership to make decisions. It's good to have people who have experience and knowledge related to financing, billing, and contracts. If they're not part of currently your team, you may want to reach out to MCTAC and as part of your extended, you know, team. And we like to think of ourselves that way, is that we're a resource that people can reach out to us if in their own work group or team, you know, they do need some expertise around some of these basic billing, contractual, finance-related issues. So extend to us, make us part of your extended team by reaching out. Then, of course, those expected to carry out the change in day-to-day activities to the degree that you can involve them, those who can provide any needed resources like us, and those whose values, interests, beliefs, and orientation, you know, really align. So folks who really feel that they could take advantage of this change process within managed care and really make it work, and may find some opportunities that may actually advance the mission and the vision that you guys have. So here's a poll question. And you're going to have a choice to select either A, B, C, or D. What best describes who is managing the transition to managed care for your organization? So right now, it just may feel like you're the one who is trying to manage this thing, but depending on where you are in the system, would A be the right answer for you? That we have a team comprised of the right people. They have the right skills, the right knowledge, the right levels in the organization. We have the right people. Or B, we have a team, but we're missing some key areas of expertise on our team. C, the executive staff, cabinet, senior management is managing the change, but we're not really that involved, right? So, and that's for those embedded in large organizations. You know, we know we're going to be affected by this change, but there are folks working on it, and we're kind of peripheral at this point. Or D, we haven't yet, even thought about this area. We haven't put together any right team. I haven't got myself on a team where I can, that's involved in this if I'm in a larger organization. So if whatever seems closest to your reality, A, B, C, or D. So we're going to just give you a moment to select which answer fits best to you. Just check that circle, I think, pretty much on the answer that's closest to your reality. Brianna, are you managing the poll of questions? Okay, so the poll has ended. We're going to put up the results. Now, I'm not seeing the results. Is anyone? Oh, I'm now seeing the results. Thank you. So we have.
Sorry about that, Tony.
That's okay. No problem, Brianna. Thank you. What best describes? So the answer for A, it's a small number, right? 3 out of like 36, a small percentage. Another little larger number, have a team but maybe missing some folks. For a considerable number of folks, there's work going on, but they're not really that involved with it. So one of the challenges there is how do we get involved so that we're at the table? And then others, just very few who haven't really put this together. But for many, there was no answer, which I'm not sure that maybe these items or these options didn't really capture your kind of like reality. So at this I think this is an important, very important piece. So I'd like to just invite folks on the chat box to kind of like indicate around this area of being part of a team. Are there particular questions or challenges that you're most concerned about with respect to being at the table when decisions are being made around transitioning to managed care? If anyone would be, willing to just kind of like chat in some of your experiences around this, in terms of being part of a team or being able to organize a team, what are some of the challenges that you are encountering or anticipate encountering that concerns you most? And if folks, just give folks a moment. I'm just curious to see if there's some folks who have some thoughts about that. And Ann, you can let me know if folks are typing anything in.
I will. I'll add, Tony, that one of the things I've heard recently is that the boards that some of these programs, whether they're true governing boards of directors or advisory boards, if they're part of a larger organization, we're often constructed with a different skill set in mind than the skills that might be most helpful to have during all of this transition. We hear that a lot from people. And maybe you have some thoughts on, how people can use resources, either, augment their boards or find other people to help them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one is to first try to like size that up to see who you have already that you could reach out to that's, if it's part of your board structure. The other is resources like, MICTAC, if there's an area of expertise or knowledge or information, to just stay as close to us as you possibly can. Take advantage of all of the informational webinars that we're able to provide. So I think that those are are important steps. If you're part of a larger organization, when I'm looking at the folks who answered C, that means there's folks in who are working on this, but we're somehow just not involved. That to me is like a serious issue. And the question is how to get involved so that your perspective is at a table where some decisions are being made. So those are, I think, are some of the thoughts that I have around this. And I'm wondering if anyone is. Yeah, a couple of people did chat in, Tony. One person said, and I'm sure this echoes the sentiments of others, it's challenging to get involved in my agency due to the structure of management.
I feel that as a family support program, our voice should be heard, but it's not. I feel like our input doesn't matter. And then another person chatted in that if the urgency has not been clear, it's difficult to build a team to manage the change.
Yep. Yeah, so those are, yeah. No, go ahead.
I'll share a couple other comments with you, and then perhaps you can reflect on these.
Sure.
Someone else said, my concern is that there are two groups of parent partners in the agency, and I worry that we will be overlooked as a resource for families. So even within, some of these large agencies do have different kinds of subgroups within them. Another person commented, explaining to people who do not have experience with managed care some of the complexities of billing, service summaries, and the system to help the team decide how we can best transition. And another person commented, we do have board involvement and 2 senior staff, including the executive director, but it's difficult to find a way to include staff in complicated decisions like billing issues and reaching out to managed care organizations. Do have to say that services director explained transition to staff, and they handled that presentation exceptionally well.
Okay. Yeah,
so a couple kinds of questions there. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Tony.
No. Well, Ann, when these issues come up, I have no pat kind of formula answer to say, oh, this is how you sort of address it. These are some of those ongoing challenges. There are some of them that really are going to be like unique and specific to the setting and organization that you're in. The comments around you need urgency before you can really form a team is absolutely correct. What I'm kind of like, sort of like thinking about is this notion of feeling disconnected, and it's almost like another area to really discuss with individual programs. What's the exact context? How come you're not seem to be built into the fabric of the organization? There's a whole area of managing up. Which is an area that I've done like previous webinars on actually, where, what are some of the strategies to engage executive leadership in accomplishing your goals, right? What are some of the approaches to inform and engage leadership so that you're on the radar and that you're viewed as an important part of their organization's, vision, mission, and accomplishing the high priority goals. And that's a whole, area. But I think that as you've identified those areas, I would make that like an important agenda item for our very next meeting and discussion with the board of saying, okay, let's step back and let's think about how we can reach out to and engage leadership in a way that we're more likely to be at the table than not. And so that's pretty much all I can really kind of like offer in a general sense, right now. But as what I'm getting educated on is that that's a really important area that may require like another opportunity to have some discussion and shared decision making, and also hearing from others who have been able to get really on the agenda with leadership, and that's going to be on the scope of today. But my guess is that there are family support programs that have been able, and for whatever the reason might be, right? Because there's maybe a lot of unique aspects of the organization. It could be the commitment of the leader. Some leaders are very, they're very supportive of the engagement of family support programs, and others may not. And that may, so there's a lot of unique situations I think that need to be addressed. Yeah. But
and I want to share with you, Tony, that we've talked about the fact that these folks that are operating within larger agencies do need some specific support, and we're looking at just what you talked about, some strategies that they might be able to use within their organizations, try to promote some conversation between the leadership and the family support program, and we're definitely going to be attending to that set of issues. I also think that someone raised the issue of, how much information or how to deliver information to staff in a way that's not overwhelming and it's comprehensible and understandable. And I think that's a real challenge, and that people are kind of finding their way with that. And I would really encourage people to sort of move toward that problem rather than away from it, because you'll find out what people do and don't know, and you can create another opportunity to fill in some of those gaps, but not informing them about the changes and not equipping them with the language of managed care, for example, because it's not appealing and complicated, will mean that you have a bigger gap to fill later on when the changes really do come. Yeah.
No, absolutely. That's the urgency issue comes in. That it's like critically important for folks to be informed, and that leaders provide the opportunities for people to get the the information. There's one thing I do want to share with all of you around, if you're struggling with somehow being recognized and engaged and involved within a larger organization, this is a sort of a lesson in terms of managing up. It's part of a webinar that I've given a presentation on this, and that is the mindset for successfully engaging leadership in organizations needs to be, this is how we can help you achieve your mission, your high priority goals, as opposed to, we want you, the leader, to help us meet our goals and our vision. And what has been discovered over years, I think, from people who have been involved in how do I engage leadership, it's sort of ask not what the leaders can do for you, but ask what you can do for the leaders. And I actually think that that's an important message. It's a message that was shared with me as well by a guy named Joe Parks, who's currently the Medicaid director in Missouri, who was involved in basically all integrated care in Missouri. And his job was to try to get executive leadership to kind of embrace a certain perspective. But the way he went about it, and I've taken this to heart, he said what really made a difference is I presented myself as a resource to leadership as opposed to what I wanted from leadership. And that idea of joining leaders, how we support leadership in accomplishing their mission, made the big difference in terms of being able to enter that system and to then be a part of a player who can influence what happens. So just a thought I wanted to share with you. There's no simple answer around it, but I think that perspective and something to think about, how does our family support program and approach, how is it that we contribute and support the high priority goals of the leadership in this larger organization? That, I think, is a very important starting point if the goal is to engage leadership in supporting and involving you in a decision-making capacity. I don't know, Ann, does that make sense to you? And
it makes total sense, and it makes total sense. And I would add one thing, Tony, which is that same strategy will work with the managed care organization as well.
Yes.
Because they have certain targets and goals that they need to meet, and you want to be able to do good work with families and help those families move forward, and you can do that and also help other people meet their deliverables, their objectives, their targets. Some of them are quantitative, reducing hospitalization by 25%. You can help with that. It doesn't, it doesn't take away from the work that you're doing, because what you're doing will, in fact, help with that. I mean, I think you need to stay open to different approaches. Somebody earlier mentioned looking for gaps that family support. Family support has a real distinct advantage in this change, and that is that you are already very agile, versatile, flexible providers of things. You've been doing individualized care for a long time, and you're good at fitting in where you need to fit in with the family. But the piece you need to add is to articulate what you do in a way that doesn't just talk about family benefit or what your program needs, but how it's going to help grease the wheels of the rest of the system is really, I think, what Tony's getting at here. And so that can happen at a lot of levels.
Great. Terrific. Thanks so
everyone
much
for sharing. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I want to thank folks who chatted in. And let's just go to the next slide. This whole notion of the right team, I just quickly share this perspective. Another organizational leadership writer, Jim Collins, that leaders of companies or programs or whatever it might be go from good to great, not with where they're going, but with who. And that's just getting the right people involved, the wrong people off the bus, right people in the right seat. It has a lot to do with how you develop your team, the continuing support for your team, the supervision of team members, the skill and knowledge of team members. All of those things become really critically, important. Actually, what Jim Collins says, that's more important than really sort of like the overall strategic plan of a program or an organization, that you get the right people have the right knowledge and skills, that they will, in fact, move the direction of the organization or program towards very high levels of quality. But, at times it feels a little bit like this in the system. So I want to just give that sort of like little picture of, at times we feel like we're kind of pushing the, the bus along as well. So what the managed care transition implementation team needs, any team you have together, is one is to know a little bit about these change management strategy, and that's exactly what the goal is for today, is that you have some grounding and foundation in this, and then some basic knowledge and quality improvement, and then the education of the workforce. But today, of course, we're focusing on that first bullet. Now, supervisors, managers, this is the hands-on, the ground, on-the-ground leaders to guide and support change, right? And all of these issues that we've already kind of addressed in many areas. And again, depending on the kind of structure you have and your role, whether there's supervisory structure and the role of supervision, and I do think that that's going to be a critically important part. I'm absolutely convinced that in terms of the competency, the skill, and outcomes associated with the application of those skills, to do it really at very high level of quality, this role of supervision is going to be critically important, and that's something for everyone to kind of step back and think a little bit about. That's across the system, family support, clinical programs, you name it. So let me say a little bit about the leader-manager piece. I'm not going to go on too much with this. Leadership is a little different than being a manager. And with leadership, and I've been mentioning this, is that if you're in the business of helping individuals or organizations or programs cope with change, adapt to shifting conditions and expectations and environments, you are in a position of leadership, even if your formal title isn't as such. And leadership anticipates changes, initiates changes. Management is a different thing. At some point, you will kind of like find a formula that sort of works, that you're able to make the best use of the staff that you have, and you're able to deal with any of the requirements around managed care, and you find a set of processes that work for you, that don't need a lot of attention over and over and over again, that don't get stuck a lot of the times that you have to keep fixing. And that's where both leadership and management really need to come together. So one is not better than another. They just different roles at different times. Both leadership, but at some point, those nuts and bolts, getting into exactly how we actually implement and how do we provide services in a way that's aligned with these managed care requirements, you need to get there too. And that means the procedures and the policies, the roles and responsibilities, the documentation, the whole fiscal piece, the management of risk, right? And so I just wanted to make that important, point. The other piece for Cotter number 5 is empower action, and that's where, the team members and the team. Now, if you are engaged with, say, a larger organization and the executive director says, okay, we really do need and want to expand our support program. We want it to be an integral part of the services here as part of our managed care, change and all of that. It's really for leaders to empower action, that folks can take some steps and don't have to jump through many different hoops. Now, some of this may or may not be applicable to where your role is, but that's what Cotter found in organizations where a team was empowered to make some of the changes and make recommendations and implement some of the changes, that if they had to jump through 25 hoops in order to get permission, it didn't work. It just didn't work, that they were empowered. The other is, as you guys begin to accomplish some wins, meaning you figure out how to set up the contract, you're able to know how to kind of bill or whatever documentation requirements, whatever it might be that's related to being successfully managing it, is to really share it with folks, is to make sure that those positive steps that you've made, that you don't wait till like everything is completely done. And that's what Cotter found, is that leaders in organizations that were successful, that they just, the small steps, the small gains, the small improvements, the small successes were celebrated, right? We're acknowledged, we're recognized. It's just very motivating for a team and an organization when they see some of their hard work actually being implemented and doing well. Okay, so I'm going to go, I'm just thinking of the time here, so I'm going to look a little further. Now, the other issue is not to let up. One of the things Carter found is when leaders started to encounter a lot of difficulties, some just got a little bit exhausted by the thing and just kind of lost a sense of confidence. And somehow that was communicated to the organization. That's a big problem. In most change, it will not be nice and linear. It won't be nice and smooth. There'll be times when, gee, we seem to be making progress and then we get stuck. Or we make some progress, gee, we feel like we're going backwards a little bit. That should not be discouraging. It's actually almost built into managing major change. And those leaders who just don't, just keep going. Just keep moving along. Okay, we'll solve that problem. Oh, we have this thing popped up. Okay, we'll deal with this problem. Okay, well, did you hear about this? We had to do this. I mean, all these sorts of issues that will come up is just simply not to get discouraged and to just keep moving forward. It may seem obvious, but Carter found that some leaders, the way they dealt with when they felt they came up against, you know, a big brick wall that they couldn't go further, just sort of like backed away and didn't look at like a workaround kind of like process. And those who did kept moving forward, and then make the changes stick. And once you get to that point, it's build it into your day-to-day business, and that means the way what we expect of our staff in terms of performance. Who do we hire? Our hiring practices is going to ensure that the changes that we've made that are likely to be sustainable and supported by the folks we hire, our performance standards, the documentation that we have in place, how we reinforce folks for positive changes, and those sorts of things. Okay, so this grid is just, if you ever really wanted to try this thing out, you could use this grid as part of an agenda to say, okay, let's talk about creating a sense of urgency. What's the major challenge for us? What is the strength that we have around that? What should we stop doing, start doing? And then what are some of our steps that we might take to communicate a sense of urgency? So if you were to take the Carter model and then lay it out as a grid and think about for each one of those 8 steps, you know, where are we and where should we be in terms of those 8 steps? This is just a grid that can help you kind of think that through. So what's the leader to do in somewhat ambiguous future? And this is the issue around what steps can you take even when things aren't so clear? So the catalysts for really change, there's a lot of catalysts. What gets people like, excited and needing to make some kind of change? What's the source of change? Well, there's a lot of things, right? And I'm kind of going through a whole list. But really where we are now is the new payment and oversight system, right? That's really the stimulus. It isn't like these others were the stimulus. It wasn't like there was tons of complaints or the accreditation requirements changed or market forces changed or system reputation. No, what this change is, the catalyst for this change is a new payment oversight system, right? So the way in which people manage change is often related to what the catalyst is for change. And in this case, you all know what that is, right? And it's a new payment oversight system. So what to do, and as I mentioned earlier, just focus on quality. You just can't go wrong. You won't feel bad about it. You won't say, gee, wasting our time. And there are a number of dimensions of quality, and if you work on any of these things, you are moving in the right direction. There's no managed care system or healthcare system we don't want it to be safe. Or, gee, don't worry about being effective. Every system, every chain, managed care or otherwise, all of these dimensions of quality are going to be highly prized. Accessibility, that the folks who are beneficiaries can get into services. And there's no system that says, gee, it's really good if our beneficiaries or clients don't get into services or have a hard time or have to wait weeks, like the timeliness issue. So if somebody has a need, how long does it take for us to respond to that need? If it's very immediate, that you get a plus in terms of quality. If it takes a long time, you get a minus. Continuity, coordination, appropriateness. These are some of the dimensions of quality. And any organization who says, well, look, I know we have to figure out all these details around contracting and billing and all of those issues, and those are very, very high priority. We got to get that right, so that we can engage with managed care very successfully. So that's a whole other area. And then there is, okay, in addition to that, what do we do in terms of our actual service delivery? You know, the work that we do, the core work that we do, not the oversight payment system. And that has to do with these dimensions of quality. And so what can, think about this. If you ask yourself, what is it we can do to make things safer, right? And does that involve, like, do we have to train staff a little bit differently? Do we have to be able to identify risk factors in crisis situations, and how do we help families that may be in that type of situation? How do we help them to access some help? If you're working with clinicians to ensure that families have a crisis plan that's in place, that they have the information in terms of really navigating the kind of system, and that there aren't undue risks that folks are taking. Anything you do to support that and reduce risk, you're in the business of quality. Anything you do to improve effectiveness, how do you know? How do you know that you've done a good job? How do you know? And that's always an interesting thing. And I must tell you honestly, when I was running partial hospitalization programs, if someone asked me, this is back in the 80s, so I said, well, Tony, how do you know you're doing a good job? You know what my honest answer would have been? Listen, what do you mean? We're doing a very good job, so how do you know? Well, nothing bad's happened in the last 2 weeks. And most of the staff are showing up when they're supposed to. And most of the clients are showing up when they're supposed to. And nothing bad has really happened. That would have been pretty good. It felt to me like we put a lot of our energy just to try to make that outcome. Now, today, it wasn't as if I was feeling so wonderful about that outcome, that the absence of bad things happening. But I think sometimes we struggle with, okay, so how do we know that we're accomplishing our mission? What would be the clear indicator for us? And so any steps you take to define what effectiveness means, to measure what effectiveness means, you're in the business of quality. And no one is going to say at some point, oh, stop doing that because we have managed care here. That won't happen. Stop reducing risk because managed care is here. Or stop being timely with your services. So I do think that's an important message, that you can never go wrong. You will always be increasing or supporting your position in a healthcare system when you are focusing on one or more dimensions of quality. The other is continuity and equity, providing care that doesn't vary in quality because of personal characteristics of the folks that you serve, but also doesn't vary in quality depending on which staff person you see. And we have that in our system. Well, if you see staff person A, you're going to get this type of quality or approach. If you go to B, you're going to get a different one. You go to C, you get a different one. And so what that often communicates is that this isn't really an organization that has a shared vision, that has a constancy of purpose, that has a value system and approach that guides what people do. It's kind of like whatever the person wants to do at that time defines the service. That often is not such a great way to organize a system of care. And so anytime you think about a continuity, and that no matter what your gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, geographic location, whatever, our services, we align them with the demographics and the cultural perspective, the religious beliefs, really those personal preferences and values. We don't have this very rigid type of an approach where it only allows in folks who have similar beliefs or values. But rather we adapt, we're flexible, we are very concerned about that individual's view of the world and what their expectations are and what would be a valuable service to them. So that's really being client-centered, family-centered, family-driven, those sorts of issues. Aligning the work with expressed felt need of families, to align with their goals and preferences and strengths. And how do you do that? Sometimes people aren't so clear on what it is that they'd like to see accomplished. explore the barriers to involvement in services, expand the involvement of family peers, all of that, right? No, it really isn't a system we say, well, we don't want to be so client-centered anymore. Oh, gee, you know, why if really families, are they really important? I must tell you, in my career, I did so much family work when I was working in partial hospitalization programs and directing one, where actually it was before there was NAMI. It was ALMI, Advocacy League for the Mentally Ill, and just meet with families in church basements. And they were great educators to me. And also in my work, I really don't know how I would have accomplished much with the clients I was serving. These were adults with serious mental illness if I did not involve and engage family members, both as resources, but also the impact that this has had on their own lives. So, you know, it's that kind of client-centered, family-driven, where we can really kind of engage all the resources in a person's life. I mean, that's like not just a nice thing, it's a critical thing. And to be able to demonstrate the positive outcomes associated with that's really going to help managed care and organizations achieve their mission, their high priority goals. And I think that's really the major source of communication and anything you do to enhance that you can demonstrate the importance and the significance of that, again, that improves quality. So the bottom line, the combination of practical leadership strategies coupled with a focus on quality is needed to successfully guide an organization through this whitewater rafting environment ahead. Right? Gee, we sure wish it was like crew, where everybody's just rowing, we know exactly where we're going, and we know the pace at which we go. What leaders do and do not do will play a critical role in optimally responding to change. You can't get around it. If there is one common finding across all organizational literature, is that the behavior of the leader is not just a nice thing. It is absolutely critical and instrumental in helping an organization to successfully meet the challenges of any significant change in that system. And make every use of every technical assistance support from MCTAC and CTAC. I'm not saying you have to make us your homepage, but just, again, that's really why we're here. Our job is to support you. We don't necessarily, well, we're in the same kind of context as you are. Not everything is always spelled out. So we're in kind of the water rafting, you know, as well, and we have to adjust to the various needs of so many different programs throughout New York State. And your engagement, your feedback, on learning your perspective and your insights is not a side issue. It's instrumental in us being able to understand how we might be able to support the work that you're doing and support the system to change in a way that's really going to benefit the children, benefit adults, benefit providers, benefit families. That's really what, you know, our goal is all about. So we have about 10 minutes left, and folks have any questions that you'd like to raise related to this whole area of change management. We'd love to field any of those questions. So you can just chat those into the chat box, and then Ann will read them out, and then I'll respond in any way that I can. And Ann also will certainly weigh in.
Thanks, Tony.
Give folks a moment to type in a question.
Yeah. And while you're typing in the questions, I'll let you know about an upcoming webinar that we're going to do on August 13th from 2:30 to 3:30. And it's a part one of a 2 or perhaps more part series to give family peer support providers an opportunity to learn some of the fundamental concepts of managed care, some of which will be very familiar to you because some of you are really out there listening to everything you can, and also to look at some of the particular issues that you might be able to address now in order to improve your readiness and engagement in the process. So the first webinar on August 13th will really focus on some of the fundamental concepts. We're going to really try to structure those, to leave some opportunities for questions. and then, follow-up webinars will look a little bit more specifically at some strategies. So I did get a question about slides will be posted. You'll get a follow-up email when you participate in one of these webinars, and there's a link to the slides in that email, and they'll also be posted on the CTAC website. And there will be a recording of this webinar as well. So if somebody missed it, they have an opportunity to listen to that at a later time. But I really want to underscore what Tony said, which is that we're operating in this dynamic environment as well, and learning about things all the time. And we're going to really make an effort to try to get that information to you, as it becomes clear, so that you can have that to be able to make changes. But it's really important that you let us know what questions you have, what you're hearing, so that we can help you sort through all of that. And most of our work is done in a group format, so we'll be doing webinars and some regional meetings. But those individual questions really help inform what we do for the group, and sometimes we're able to actually answer those individual questions as they come up. So it doesn't look like we have any particular questions. I think from our previous chats, we've really learned some important things from you as a group about some of the needs that you have that we might be able to address going forward. And I want to take a minute to just thank Tony very much for making time. He's all over the country, and he made some time this afternoon for us to share his expertise. And I just want to thank you, Tony, for doing that.
Well, it's really my pleasure. I am, this for me is also more than just just doing a webinar on a particular topic, because, and I must say that I was very fortunate when I was starting out in this field as an intern many years ago, where the organization I worked for was very much oriented to involving and engaging families. And so, after many years of working with family support groups and, with NAMI, with, just engaging in my individual work, it's rare that I wasn't working with families, and I just wouldn't know how I would be able to actually do effective work without it. So, I'm certainly a very strong supporter and advocate for the importance of, family work, and I think the system very sorely needs you. And I don't think we're going to be able to accomplish really high level of quality without you. And so how to manage this transition is so important. And so I'm glad to have the opportunity to kind of share some pointers with you, so that your position is strong and will continue to be strong, in the future. So, I want to thank
Tony,
all of you.
Before you go, Tony, we do have one question that came in, and it's actually, a really good one. So sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure to get this in.
Sure.
Any suggestions for small agencies? It's easy to get lost when trying to stay viable without being swallowed up or eliminated.
Yeah.
So that's the question that's coming in. Yeah.
I know. It's a similar question to some clinics that are very small as well, and they've raised the same issue. Is what's going to be sort of the optimal size, of an organization or of a program to be able to manage this. I don't know if there's any kind of simple answer for it. I don't know if there are opportunities for any ability to kind of engage or merge with others, so that you are larger or being part of a larger organization. I don't know if that really seems to be a practical kind of a thing, but thinking about, recognizing that being small in this kind of environment is, there's some risk associated with that. I think that is true. So if there are opportunities, begin to think about, gee, is there any way that can we function? Are there any opportunities to either be part of a larger organization, to combine with other similar organizations, if that's practical and really doable? So those are some things I think to consider. The other is to if you're going to stay small and you want to, be viable in a changing system, is to really focus on very high level of quality, so that you can develop sort of a reputation that this is a place where there's very high level of quality, even though it's small. We don't want it to go away, or it happens to be in a community that is underserved, and we don't, that it's important that it still remains in that community. So I think that those are just, some things that come to mind. I don't know, Ann, if you have, I'm sure this issue has come up with you, and if there's anyone else on the line who also has that concern and would like to chat in, some thoughts that they have, that we welcome that as well. But let me first ask you, Ann, if anything has come to mind for you over the, during this time, around the smallness of an organization.
Yeah, I think this question does pertain to lots of small providers who don't necessarily have a lot of infrastructure. There are a series of conversations going on. There have been a few trainings across the state, in-person trainings that are designed for small. You'll see it listed as HCBS, so they're home and community-based services providers. A lot of small providers are asking this question, and they're small and then they're smaller, but from a infrastructure perspective, there's some sort of critical mass, it seems, where the tail doesn't wag the dog in terms of all the functions you need to be able to perform to really participate in the billing aspects and the documentation aspects of managed care. So, for example, like the cost of, dealing with an electronic medical record, you need to have a certain volume of billing in order to be able to do that. So what some of the small providers are in conversations about right now is perhaps trying to create a collective back office function that might be able to relieve some of that pressure so that small providers can share some of those functions and still do what they each do best. And in that context, it's really important to not just talk to family support providers, but other small providers in your region. And, the feasibility of that depends on your locale. But because billing, for example, does not have to happen where you live, I think we need to look statewide at opportunities for those small providers to collectively create some of that capacity. There's also the issue of, are you part of the network? Do you have enough clout to negotiate a favorable arrangement with managed care? And I think we're learning more and more about that, and it may cut both ways, that there may be some advantages to being part of the network, being in communication with the performing provider systems, the PPSs that are part of your district efforts regionally, and also really establishing some relationships with the managed care organizations so they know you're there and they know what you do, and as Tony says, they know you do it well. So, those are all different avenues that you can pursue. Exactly what will work for each agency is different. And, we're going to be continuing to have some of those conversations this fall and, trying to identify some choices for people to consider that your team, that your board can look at and decide, is this something that will work for you? Yeah.
Okay, I think we're just about, out of time.
I think we are.
Thanks so much for participating. I hope there's one or more ideas that are useful to all of you. That would be my goal, and I hope that's happened. And wish you all well, and again, to keep connected with the resources here at MCTAC and CTAC. And thanks, Ann. I want to thank you, Ann, also for arranging this and getting this set up. I think that it's really important to ensure that we have continuing support for the family organizations out there.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.